Just a minute. I mean, it just replays once I go here. I think somehow these guys should solve these problems.
Uh,
Like when you just go YouTube, I mean, it just loads up, and then the YouTube window opens up, and then again it just okay. We got it. Okay, awesome. Hello, folks. A very good evening and welcome back to our Friday Funda. We have yet another very interesting speaker who's going to push us beyond design, right? And this time we got a good speaker in-house, right? So we have Jasmeet. Let's welcome Jasmeet. So who again comes from a very strong design background. Did his bachelor's of degree in IIT Guwahati. So Jasmeet has touched almost you name it, and he has actually done it most of it, right? So teaching, consulting, trying to evangelize the product. Also started. He had his own product idea as well, and he ran a very successful design consulting firm, Tinker Firm, right? Tinker Firm, sorry. So I think yes. So that's where I think looks like he has touched almost most of things, and now he's in a space where he wants to push himself beyond what he's been doing it, right? And maybe that's his inspiration to get to this meta design, right? So let's hear from Jasmeet. So what is his thought process and what inspired him to move into this another phase of design? And let's see what we can try and get inspired from him. Over to you, Jasmeet.
Thank you, Dan. So I think let me get acclimatized to the idea of getting in a quorum of a talk again. It's been a long while. This is a very kind of hazy topic to talk about because most of it becomes too theoretical in general. So what I've tried is to put up a semi show in that essence of how we can go about talking about the whole topic in the first show. So before we start, I'm not here as an expert. I am here as an explorer. This is something that I am also exploring. So a lot of things are a hit and a miss that way. And it's been a decade in which I've learned, taught, applied, and eventually unlearned design also. And I think this is where we are currently in the state of what I want to talk about. I am trying to and going to walk you through the same unlearning process hopefully today. So with that, I'll start. We'll start with chapter one, or the order one in this case, the idea of or the chaos of going meta. In this case, and I say that in also a sense where because this whole thought process starts leading you to an existential crisis: what design is, why are you designing, what are you trying to design at the end of the day, and how this whole field emerged. So understanding a field is very hard that way once you start learning the field from the get-go, and you stop looking out of it for a while. So we'll jump on those ideas here. For me, a journey kind of started while reading a book by Victor Papanek called Design for the Real World. One of the best books in design I've read, which has actually made sense to me. And there, even in 1970, Victor Papanek raises question on the existence of design in the sense of the value that it brings about and how it does that. It also talked about how industrial design had kind of started degrading in the sense of their value proposition. And this is also, by the way, rise of at this point around capitalism and industrialization. So the mass production of products is also happening. You can actually say industrial design was in a state where currently we see UX design, that everyone knows they need it and there's huge demand for it. And how the industry responds at that point of time is a mark of how it should be at the end of the day. And Victor Papanek raises a huge amount of questions on that. To something I stumbled 2 days back. This is Tim Brown. I'm hopefully not going to give you an introduction of Tim Brown right now. Uh, he has been asking and kind of asking for a lot of designers to start taking pledges in the essence that he also starts questioning the value of design. So this is 1970, this is 2020 now. Nothing really has changed in that essence. The question is still being asked. We haven't been able to find an answer to it. He's also talking about how actual value of design that design promises can come about but hasn't been. And he also was talking to talk about how do we try to change that. All of that aside, and this everything in between kind of scenario where a lot of places questions are being raised about efficacy of how design thinking is done. Is product design actually solving problems anymore? What are we really trying to make for? So all in all, this is where even I started to get kind of confused and thought maybe design is broken somehow, somewhere, but where exactly? Answer trying to find an answer to this kind of is this what this whole quest is about. So A lot of this, again, talk will not be answering anything per se, will be more about how at least I went about thinking and the kind of things I learned or found in between. So I do not have answers to any of the questions that I would raise eventually. So began the endless questions and doubts. This is where we started reevaluating every project that we had done in a while, trying to see what happened, where did things go wrong, where did things go better. So it was not an analysis on performance, it was an analysis on nature. And we wanted to know as much as we can. And so began endless curiosities, where we would start mapping out different curiosities that we had at that point of time, trying to simulate everything back to an experience. And there were so many. Frankly, no idea. We had no idea how to do this. It would take a lot of time to understand how to consume this, how to go about the process, circular questions, circular logics popping up again and again. So kind of emptiness in that essence here, which will talk about this realization being hitting that the meta, going meta is not very straightforward in that essence because we're not used to it and it's chaotic. It's very chaotic. Let's go a little further. I wanted to jump into this assumption. Why do all of this if it is so chaotic in the first place? So my assumption to jump into it was a meta designer will be able to understand design better, or as I call it, jumping out of the pond. The reason I say that this is the pond. Once you jump out of it, you can actually see what the pond is like. And it also lets you start looking at different things it has a relationship with. In trying to find things out, there were many things that could kind of we can relate to. Something interesting popped up, cybernetics. So I stumbled upon a field of cybernetics through trying to understand systems, trying to understand how logic was created, how was system design being talked about before design came into the existence, because that is the, I think, overarching way to look at this whole thing as a system. Cybernetics, if you have a question, this is again, I'm walking you through the process of finding out things myself. And this is the first question was, what is this whole thing about? What stuck to me was, if you see the third last line, where it says the study of systems and processes that interact with themselves and produce themselves from themselves. Interestingly, more I delved into it, I also realized this wasn't the first time someone was talking about looking at any field through cybernetic lens. Art being an example, architecture and design being an example, which is again what you're trying to do now. So interestingly, cybernetics has a little complex connotation to it. And for the same reason, you don't have to read all of this. To give you an overarching point of view, cybernetics currently talks about having four orders, which deal with various complexity or recursiveness of a problem solution space. So what we will concern or talk about now is first order or second order mostly. And to kind of give you a simple version of this first order study of observed systems is most probably talking about how you look at a system from within, while the second order will talk about how do you look at it from without. To help you, remember order one, remember order two, and we've right now in this whole discussion been applying cybernetics all along, interestingly. So from the advent of raising that question of how to understand it, we already had started the process. And I think this is what we'll get used to in moving ahead in that essence. What we'll do is we'll take a break for a minute or two, maybe have a quick conversation with Dhyan about this, and then let's start again.
Yep. Yeah, folks, if you have any questions, please do punch it in the Q&A so we can take it up. So yeah, so I do have a couple, right? So where did this entire journey started, Jasmeet? So if you can just help us. So because we have a different set of people here, right? So from beginners to advanced. So like what is that real? Yeah, you did mention about the particular book, which kind of a trigger for you. So the first question for me is like, yeah, but what is it? Where did the story start?
So, frankly, I don't know how to answer this because I don't think there is a point where it started from.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, the ad, Once you started to learn something, I think these kind of things, processes take root there. Once you have the tendency to start questioning what you're learning in the first place. So I think it has been there, kind of brooding and collecting over for a while. A lot of time, at least for me also, what I had decided to myself is I would spend close to 10 years in the domain to understand it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what the current time is. I'm nearly done with those 10 years. So I have enough view in that essence to kind of at least say that Once you look at enough of something, you realize there has to be certain boundaries. It looks like a very endless pool once you start kind of looking at it from the inside when you only start. And now was the time I thought, okay, boundaries we can talk about. A lot of this comes from a lot of questions that we are raising nowadays in terms of how, one, I think we are very started about design, and that design is going to achieve a lot of things. We talk about sustainable living, we talk about design to be a know-it-all answer to every problem. On the
Mm-hmm.
other hand, we still can't figure out our way around simple thing like how do we structure something in an informative way. We are still raising questions from this level to that level, and we have no idea, and we are still at lost. What we
Yep.
have done eventually is created certain form of structures to make sense of that, and it seems like that process is stopped somewhere. We are learning same things in a 80 to 90% of what you're learning in design is similar to what we would have learned maybe 10 years back, even maybe 20. I think I can keep on going till it actually starts not make no sense that why the design being a young field hasn't evolved.
Mm-hmm.
And even I want my profession to be taken that seriously when someone says it's 2 minutes job to create a wireframe or a painting a painting a picture on laptop, or your as people kind of also still look designers, that there's a seriousness has to come back, that it is this discipline which is actually evolving over time.
Absolutely.
I think that thought process kind of started this.
Yep. Yep. Fair. So yeah, I think we have a question from Karthik. So I think it's a very interesting question. So did you ever stumble upon any other field that pushes the factor of going towards meta apart from just design or any other discipline?
Interestingly, science does that up to an extent.
Mm-hmm.
Even but overarchingly, I think I haven't seen this a lot. I would say that thought process itself vanished with a lot of changes in how we work nowadays, in terms of how the work has set in post industrialization. And
Yep.
I am still talking about post industrialization because it really hasn't changed yet as
Mm-hmm.
much as we talk about. The systems are still in place. And that kind of system does not let you go better. It never lets you go better. So none of the field at that point has. But if you go back, you'll see the conversation of these kinds are not less. But there are a lot of areas, a lot of fields which have these kind of conversation going on. And again, I think the father or mother of that field in that case, in this case, is going to be philosophy, where all of this questioning even emerges. So that interesting philosophy is about that recurrence, or keep on talking about why it even exists in the first place. So, short answer, I don't think it has been happening for a good amount of time. Once in a while, you'll see someone come and challenge it, but not as a practice.
Yep. Yep. So yeah, I mean, I do have a bunch of follow-up questions. Like, so how can somebody even consciously make an effort to move into this space, right? So because
I think even I don't have an answer to it. I have tried to do it some way, which I'm hopefully going to walk you guys through.
okay, yeah, we'll definitely
I
try to explore it.
don't even, in fact, you have a couple of ideas. I would love to know.
Yep, yep. And any particular reason why we you picked up only the cybernetics route? So there, I mean, there definitely must be like multiple
There are
ways.
others also. Agreed. I think this was something that I found to be very new to me in that essence. I think looking at it from psychology lens, we've talked about a lot of stuff. If you talk about philosophy itself, you go too broad. So even though a lot of options, in fact, scientific methodology will be one, but I still think it's going to box it out. In fact,
Mhm.
we will use partly that also. But cybernetics is going to also talk about that. So there was no one answer to this. It could have been taken. In fact, that has happened, which again we'll talk about. But cybernetics seemed to be something interesting and could give you actually a way to look at any system. So it was agnostic. And
Got it.
cybernetics was very new for me. And that, again, I think that curiosity also kind of took over. But why not look at it from new lens that I haven't even seen?
Mhm. Yep, yep. And I think there's a even I had this question like which has already come now is like the first question a lot of the business folks are going to ask like what's the ROI, right? So like what is the proof that why
Which
should
I
we
hope I
go
will be
via
able
the
to.
meta path?
I really hope I'll be able to give an answer to. Like, this is the question that I was actually wondering once I think after our conversation. That the last question that I will have to answer and put on the pedestal to be what is the ROI? Why
Sure.
do I do all of this? And I realize I have to talk about those things also. So yeah, I hope I will be able to kind of make a case for that.
Yep, yep. Sure, I will take
Can
one
continue?
more.
Acha, one more, yeah, please.
Sorry, Jasmine.
Please go ahead. One more. We can
Yeah,
take one.
yeah, maybe one more we'll take and then we can move forward. So yeah, I think another question come from Ashok was like, so yeah, he says that yeah, so you've been in the industry for kind of over a decade, and then right now we have this new influence of AI. So where so it's going to be evolving thing, right? So it's isn't it more of a everyday day to day kind of a learning during
It is.
while the changing times? So yeah, so what is
It
your
is going to be. But is that happening in design? I don't think we're learning anything new in design on a day-to-day basis anymore.
okay? So that's where you see the gap, and maybe something the meta can be one way to
It's
like.
a very the inception of this also. Another friend of mine who I was having a similar conversation while around these things was once he we were talking about things 3 years back.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of things have changed in the last 3 years.
Good.
Has anything changed in design
Mm-hmm.
other than the tools that we are kind of using, other new tools? So we are still at the consumption end in design. We're
Right.
consuming tools in design. Our change or adaptation is I am going to use a new tool today.
Mm.
Is that it to it?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. I think point taken. Design is still doing a catch-up game. So cool. So we are good, right? We can move
Yeah.
forward now. Now. Yep.
So we'll quickly recap. Summary of all of what we did before this was we can't truly understand a system without stepping out of it. We've been trying to understand design by being a designer till we didn't, which is today, which is now the conversation that we are having now. So, by the way, one more thing. What we are missing still is a tool to go meta. There are many possible tools. For now, we'll just focus on one, which is first principles thinking. And to give you a quick idea of that, at least for me, first principle thinking was first time for my first experience was trying to prove Pythagoras theorem, where I realized how I didn't have no idea what it was. Eventually, when I was reading about a lot of stuff, this popped up, and kind of it seemed like a very natural way to look at things. And since we have been friends, and if you know of first principle thinking, there's a great possibility that you've heard just because of recent news, uh, kind of a year back maybe, where Elon Musk talked about it in some talk. After that, it was something that everyone was talking about. So, first principles talks about approaching anything fundamentally from the lowest possible assumption and trying to build things on top of that by not relying to the current metaphors or current way of thinking of that particular problem space or the subject, which is exactly what we'll try to do now. So, that brings us to chapter 3, which is the grinding of the first principles, or we'll call that pearl diving from now. It's because the process, if you realize, is also like a pearl diving syndrome. You will go into the depth, try to find stuff. Sometimes you'll find something, sometimes you won't. But the only way to find it is by going to depth again and again and again. So I think I would really relate this process to pearl diving in that essence. Second, I think this is going to be a long discussion if I go in this slowly. I will most probably try to fast forward this. So fasten your seatbelts there. We'll start by talking about design its existence as a discipline and the designer, which is the driver or the adopter of the discipline. Then you're talking about designer as discipline and design by vocation, where you're talking about application of skills or actually learning and actually looking at the discipline overarchingly. We'll move on to quickly divide, deconstruct design through the lens of what, why, how, and when. Other thing, again, we don't have answers yet. This is how we're thinking, we're scribbling down. What we can though do is try to understand what value even I will get from asking why, what, when, and how. What will answer questions about the nature, about the declassification of how things are in design, what design is. Why we'll talk about its reason of existence in the first place. Once you realize that, there can be so many things that we can talk about post that. How we'll talk about how the discipline even functions. This part will talk about the core design process, various fields, and performance. So, what you're trying to do is map value out of all of these exercises. Then we'll talk about the context of when design should come into play and in which form. Because I think a lot of design is actually about figuring out where to intervene in the first place. If you start looking at this and start dissecting it, you will realize that the recursive loop has to keep on playing. For a minute, if I also think, what if I had to do the same for UX design? Because these questions are applicable to that also. Then I would go meta in that sense. So this loop is also recursive. Go ahead. So guys, remember, we are not trying to find answers. We are just running through our curiosities in a flurry. Let me take the whole discussion ahead and say there is a triad in existence now: design, designer, and designee. In this case, what designee would be? Designee would be the object of design itself and who you're designing for. So in that essence, what we also start to see is the rise of notion of experience, interaction, design object, user. And these are the things that we have heard of again and again. So we are approaching again from top down in this case, try to understand everything. Even if you don't take the differentiation between digital and physical design, you'll realize UX design, interaction design, experience design, user centricity, human centricity are all agnostic of the idea of what medium they're talking about. Medium is something that we add into it. So there is a realm of design beyond the medium itself. Going ahead, if you, sorry, focus on the last part, we will also try to question, since the user or the receiver comes in, the design object and the receiver object comes in. If the receiver is not a user, would the other person be still a designer? So in that essence, our developers machine-centered design. That means they are not very far off. There has to be a layer again that is common till you get the object into position. In our case, in the designers that we are, in our case, it's human beings. For a developer, is it a machine? But I guess it's not that important since machines come with specifications and people don't. But don't they? We have fields in existence which talk about all of these. We have psychology, we have ergonomics, we have anthropology, we have sociology. This leads me to make a quick assumption or quick conclusion that humanity should be the basis of any human-centered design. And again, it is not an add-on anymore, it's the basis. That way of looking at things changes a lot in how you design eventually. Going ahead, let's talk about the design object now. So once you start about design object, you realize what all are we designing at the end of the day. We're designing systems, we're designing strategy, so it does not have to be ethereal, that it has to be application or a product or a physical product. We also raise the question of how do you see a design output then? You will say design output kind of gauges anywhere between a design artifact and design prototype. But then if there is a design, there has to be a user, who the users are. So that is where the connotation of a pseudo user and a sample user comes in. We'll touch this again. So let's focus on this area for a while. Every artifact is made for someone in that essence. So we are still talking about the pseudo user connotation. In this essence, the artifacts that we consume and every day or kind of throw out for people to consume every day, they're also the users. In this case, they can be developers at the end of, they can be your client who you're explaining the idea or a decision maker, and even the user. So in that essence, we define client also as a proxy user. Let's talk about clients then. Since they are proxy users, shouldn't we also see how they participate into this? The efficacy of this process would be taken by how closely a client can also model a user in their head. How do we get that done? Isn't that what we've been trying to do when we explain the clients our designs and show them the screens or the flows or the rationale behind them? What we are trying to do is impart education also in terms of design to get them to a better place to be able to model that proxy user because they are the decision maker. If they don't get it, they'll not pay for it or they'll not agree to it. So again, what is coming back is, I think at the last part you look at what made me really think is even though we are working in that essence, whether we rely a lot on the experience a client will get from the deliverables themselves, are we ever focusing on that? Is client experience also part of design for us? Now we'll go back again to the designee. There was a design and there was the user. And these things will interact with each other and start changing each other. Then you realize that the sense of design, in the sense of design, what we talk about is more of a snapshot of an interaction of a user and a design, not the whole picture. We do not account for that change. That also realizes that there is a different baseline to an experience and there is a top line to an experience. When we talk about we are making a good experience, where does that sit? Have we realized there is going to be a top line and a bottom line? Lastly, design itself again as a domain has been commoditized. It's application domain in that essence. It's a skill domain in that essence. How do we move the discussion to the knowledge economy or design as a knowledge domain? So we'll wait for a couple of minutes maybe. Dan, do you want to talk about this?
Yep, I think you can, Raghuvaj, you want to take another questions or?
Yeah, maybe. I think let's do that if that's possible.
Okay, sure.
We happen.
Yeah, so there are a few things which I had you mentioned here, right? So one of the thing which has been like I've been, I mean, kind of wondering about is like digital design. We have this advantage of it's always changing, right? So it is so when you go back to the very old school designers like D.T. Ram or so their thing is like when you take out physical products like architecture or product, which is a so there's no opportunity for them to keep going and revisiting it, right? And it actually ages. As it ages, the people say the value of design comes out much more better.
Hmm.
So what is so how does I mean what is your kind of take on that? So do you think that by deep diving via this meta route, we might still be able to achieve that kind of a level of in the digital space? Uh, yeah, that's one thing which I've been always kind of
I think
pointing to.
that process started quite a long back while with IDEO itself when they defined the term interaction design in that essence.
Right.
And kind of, I think another interesting thing that you realize is I don't think there is any other profession more confused than UX design, and mostly just in terms of job designations we have.
Absolutely.
You have
Yeah.
product designer, you have interaction designer, you have user experience designer, you have UX usability designers also in that essence, and on and on. And then you have consumer experience.
Usability engineers. Yeah. Even that's been one of the designations.
So there is some confusion that's there, and the confusion is not at the level of what we have to execute. It's about who has to execute and how they have to execute.
Mm-hmm.
Job descriptions are clear.
Mm-hmm.
Titles are confusion. They don't know who these people are who will make this. And some titles are aspirational. We talk about product design, UX design being different. But frankly, have we ever written a job description for them which are different?
Yep.
Has anyone written a JD for them which are different? So what is really happening? Where is the confusion? So I think that question itself will start leading to the kind of maturity that we are talking about that design, even digital design will take.
Yep.
And if again we are talking about change, the changes are changing. The most amount of change or the actual change you'll see is mostly in terms of specifications of delivery now.
Mm-hmm.
Process hasn't changed, thought process hasn't changed in that essence.
Yep. Yep. So you also mentioned in one of the slides, right, where you said there's an opportunity for us to like kind of educate the designing. I mean, maybe it can be the end user or it can be the client, right? So how does it work here in this? Because we still, as I said earlier, we're trying to do a catch-up game.
Hmm.
Do you think it's? I mean, they'll have enough, I would say, time and resource to absorb all these extra processes to try and achieve that. Yeah, I mean, is it trying to add more complexity to that entire process itself, or is it going to because you started the entire thing with like meta design is it's all about chaos, right? So why do you even like go and get into that cluster of web?
I think again that will get answered when I can prove that value to you first.
Okay,
And the realization that if a client sees a value in it, they might agree for it, given that we make a case for it.
right.
Because that I'll not use the word education if I want any sensible collaboration with anyone. They
Mm-hmm.
need to understand certain things, the language that we want to communicate into, as much as we have to educate ourselves about the business of the business owner. I think they will also have to eventually understand about what we are doing and how can we get them in a collaboration rather than it's not a client consultant relationship in that essence.
Yes.
At the end of the day, it has to be collaboration for the product's sake.
Yep. Yep. And how do you see this as a this kind of a approach? So should it like I think I'm just trying to relate this your talk with Anijo's talk where it's good it's a nice dance between the education and
The academic and the professional.
right. So like I so it should I mean honestly it should should the push come from the practitioners or should it come from the
I think the answer to that again lies here that we talked about, right? Does there need to be a versus? Can't it be both?
Mhm.
Cannot my career at least 20% be about still being a designer by discipline than by vocation only? Can it be 80-20 rather than either Dhyan or just me? In that
Right.
essence. So I think it's again more about what we see is possible in that essence. And I think that healthy loop is easily maintained if it's internal to a person at the end of the day, because we have seen how industry and kind of education or academic collaboration also go.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what to even state in that collaboration other than the idea of people getting internships as job training.
Yep.
And it seems like industry that way does not think it has to take anything from academia, because we don't consume research, we don't consume these research projects or the new findings that are coming up and discussing them. We're just using them as a consumer of people who will enter the domain again. So I think that there's no collaboration in this. That's again because we only look at design as vocation, not as a discipline.
Mm-hmm.
And that is again where the question of design as a commodity or skill driven field versus design as a knowledge domain.
Yep. So with this, the current kind of setup, right? So yeah, what will be your proposition? Like, so let's say we have this two different way of how design is practiced now. One is in the consulting mode, and other one is you already have a large MNCs where there is a product which has been built, and then they have. So still, the structure is like mostly design as part of the product team, right?
Hmm.
So yes, it has a separate stream. So what will be your kind of a ideal way of working towards this, right? So should we be under the, because end of the day the decision makers are too many, right? Once it comes to the, so we can't work in silos. So any.
The only person you want to work in closeness with at the end of the day is person you don't understand, person you think you don't understand their work, so that you have to constantly monitor. I think that is where design again is. Everyone wants to put it in a cubbyhole because they don't know what's going to happen if they don't look at it.
Hmm.
That means we again as a discipline haven't been able to build that trust that this is what comes out of it, whoever does it. Doesn't matter it's happening outside your house or in your house.
Yep.
And that liability goes back to again us as designers. I don't think we've really done anything about it in the essence of having conversations.
Right. Yep. So yeah, so what are
More,
the kind of next steps towards this, like
I
in
think
your
I'll try to complete this well.
sure. Yep.
Maybe that question will make sense then.
Go ahead, please.
Cool. So we were pearl diving, if you remember. What did we get out of this? Is it just a brain freeze? I think we got a great designer one. So hopefully, because I don't think it's great yet. But I think if someone had to teach me design, this is how they should have introduced it to me. That how it is even coming into the existence with all its glory in place. And then would also understand what are different connotations of design in that essence. Maybe better understanding of the nature of stakeholders and tools, and maybe glimpse on some of many aspects that we need to rethink on. So I think as even Dhyan answered, what do I do about it? Sounds like a very good thing. We went on an adventure. Did we find anything of value? So let's talk about that. So chapter 4, where we'll revisit design, or as I call it, spoilers of the treasure hunt, or this is the attempt one is trying to do, any kind of redesign in a sense. So let's take one example: user personas. We model them to understand the user better. User in this case being a human. So before I move ahead, there's a very specific reason I take user persona, get them into context. This format, or not even the format, this the way of talking about a persona and modeling a user or a human being in that essence as we do it, I think hasn't really changed again for a long way. To the point that we as designers also have started raising the question of why do we even make personas? And that question is laughable not because of designers who are asking that question, it's because nobody has actually updated it in a while. Nobody has understood how it has to evolve over time. And this is the fate of most of the design deliverables. We'll try to attempt to talk about one and see where that goes. So we start with the question again: does it do justice to understanding a human being at all? Or is it too a very two-dimensional or one-dimensional way to look at it? Is it the best possible way to even represent it in that essence? Once you start with that, let's again take a small step back to understand this. Human beings don't exist as a snapshot of existence, nor does any product which they come into contact with. So we have to figure out what this means. Second, we have a tendency to learn, evolve, and even deteriorate, which is going to happen with the product either by design or exclusion. You not designing for something is also going to cause some trouble. You're not designing for an edge case is also a problem. You're designing with an edge case is also something that you want to do. So it talks about how design by inclusion and exclusion both kind of plays the role in this evolution of the user. We'll take an example. A music learning tool banks on a person evolving over time with the tool set itself. They need to learn music. As much as it can help them learn, it can also kill the drive by being monotonous for one of many possibilities. Let's try to make sense of it. So I think this came in, this is from a real project. This came in because, so the project in that essence was we were trying to build an e-learning tool, another e-learning platform, this time for music. And I say another because the age-old problem that e-learning has always been facing, except for COVID times, is that it used to see huge drop off in 80s, 90%. People taking courses, not completing it, people buying courses and not doing anything about it. I think after people taking gym subscription and not going to that, this was the other thing that people used to have online learning sessions, but not really able to complete that. And there's a huge drop off. So the whole industry is already trying to solve that. And then we are still making new products without even solving that problem. How do we talk about or increase the efficacy of e-learning? So every e-learning product, till you crack this problem, will be only this problem to solve. The biggest thing is they don't have efficacy. People don't stick. People don't respond to the content. How do we solve that? So let's take this case. In this case, I want to see how do I create the user personas or understand the user in the first place. I don't want to make assumptions from the get-go. I want to figure out the basis to do it. So since it's a learning platform, my basis is going to be awareness and knowledge and information and drive. And I think the interaction of these two will most of all define someone or the other I know. Someone with low awareness, low drive, someone with high awareness, high drive, somewhere with high awareness, low drive, and all the combinations. I would just go ahead and say there are these four stories. In this case, in lieu of time, we'll only talk about one. So let's try to model the leftmost quadrant, top left quadrant with the persona Priyam. In this case, this is how I would typically go to the extent of trying to understand a persona. Their day in the life, what they try to do, what is current state of their music learning, how do they set goals, how do they plan learning, what are the pain points, and all and all and all. But this is where we started from. What do I do with this? Interestingly, if you start to take the thought process ahead, you'll realize Priyam is this snapshot here right now in the left corner, in the left top quadrant. What it makes you realize is there is a motion possible for that persona to evolve into any other persona across this framework. You most probably ask, how will that happen? You'll start to list the events out. And you'll see you can convert someone with low awareness, high drive to high awareness, high drive with so and so kind of interventions in place. Similarly, if this goes wrong or that goes wrong, this is how the drive will drop, or this is how the persona will kind of not move in the trajectory. What will happen if it's stagnant over time? So you start to answer these questions. What you realize is this is what you have to design for against this and this. Let's call these dynamic personas. What we'll talk about is what we got out of this exercise for a minute. Again, this is what I think. I would love to know what everyone else thinks about it. I think we were able to define better design intentions. We understood the positive and negative forces that will help us create meaningful, impactful design. We also created an artifact, which interestingly will help generate better algorithmic models for inception of intelligence system. Now, this is where design is not catching up anymore. As a designer, I can go up front, maybe say, and there are better ways for someone to design an intelligent system now, which is what the algorithmic design, which a lot of people are not talking about, should be even based on. It's not that we as designers should only be consuming algorithms or be given to us as a steady state deliverable of saying that this is the requirement or not the solution, requirement and unchangeable. We can also take a step ahead and say we understand human interactions better. For a human system, this is the kind of thing that you should be doing, and that kind of becomes at the core of the product, even in the technical sense. Chapter 5 is untitled because I'm still learning, and this is all I have for now. I'm still at order 2, 3, and 4. I still don't understand. That's I also didn't bother to even talk about that. And yeah, that's all of what I had. Please take Tim Brown's pledge.
Awesome. Yep. So I think it's kind of a fair thing, like where you try to explore the and take the kind of break the typical monotony of how people start creating, understand the persona part, right? I think
Before you start raising questions, Dan, I have a question.
sure,
Was
sure, go
I
ahead.
able, was there a value? So going back to the value question that we skipped. If where we are asking questions on why even I should make persona, why would someone or a client invest in me making a persona for? If I was able to give them this picture, don't you think
Mhm.
they'll agree?
Oh yes, yes.
So it comes back to the point that saying it's not about they not wanting it; they don't know what they want. And as a designers, we are also not able to show that value proposition in place. If we can position it, we'll be able to sell it also.
Yeah, but I think I still remember, like, so in way back in, I think 2006 or seven. So when during Oracle days, so we were trying to come up with the mobile version for the CRM, and then we
Mhm.
actually did the we call this as rep rides. So what we do is we actually go with the sales reps and we spend a complete day with them. So when we showed like what does he want, he the most powerful thing he was saying is like the BlackBerry thing, right? I mean the push and the pull feature.
Mhm.
I mean that's all I need, right? So I think yeah. So now it's all history. So yeah. So sometimes it's not the answer is not with all the end users or even the clients, but that's where like yeah, this meta thinking and
We have to see that possibility first than anyone
exactly,
else.
yeah. So if we try and show the possibilities, I think they're definitely they'll be able to acknowledge and see the value in it. So that's why like there are some teams in Apple and other companies where nobody even knows that what is it they are actually the next product is going to come out, right?
Hmm.
So how are they going to do their research? So yeah, it's going to be pretty interesting on that. So I think any questions, audience, please do punch in there while we just casually chat. We still have like 10 minutes. So we have a question from Ashok. Uh, yeah. So what should you do to understand the depth of design fundamentals? So any tips or
What we were trying to do.
okay.
I
So I
think,
think
Ashok, that is the exact question that I think started this, and I don't think I have an answer to it because this is where I am.
right, right. See, I think why I think the one of the thing, right, why a lot of folks are a little struggling is so end of the day, everybody's chasing deadlines, timelines, deliverables, and then so yeah. So in this constrained kind of a working environment, so any tips or any techniques that you found where you can still hit a balance?
I think this, I didn't want to, matlab, I'm not the most disciplined person I know, frankly, but I think it
But I
still,
think any pointers will help
still
folks.
boils down to that because you have to do it as practice rather than an
Mm,
obligation. Matlab, if I can make time to eat, I can also take half an hour to think about something or write is what I, at the end of the day, tell myself I have to do something important. And I think it falls into that. If you don't want to get habitual of that, because I don't see any possibility for even you, Dhyan, even me, even most of the people I know, work is always going to increase.
yep.
There will be more responsibilities. There will be more things in life.
Hmm.
I don't think it's going to get less, even for me, even for you, even for anyone around. The time is never going to come.
Yep.
It's
Yep.
something that we have to make as part, and even at the point, if you want to make it part of our work, we have to start advocating.
Hmm.
The limitation at the end of this, I have 8 hours of work myself. I
Yes.
have to make this part of my work if I want to not spend more time on it. So if I don't want to spend 8 hours on this and 2 hours on this, I have to do it here in
Right.
my work as part of my work. So evangelizing this to clients maybe so that we get better timelines, we put better processes.
Hmm.
Talking to even in mentoring one case, we're talking about how do you go beyond that. So I think it's more of where how you can embody what you want into your work itself somehow. So
Hmm.
I think this has also been a escapade for that. I don't think I've been able to spend a lot of time on this as much as I should have. And
Yep.
reasons are same. Client timelines, delivery deadlines, can't do anything about it. But 3 years down the line, if I say I haven't done anything about it yet, I think that's totally on me.
Yep. Yep. Totally. Yep. And yeah, for the audience, I mean, so I think Jasmeet was kind enough to quickly figure out the topic and address this and in a very short period of time. But whatever you saw is actually completely his learning, right? So it's not like yeah. So yeah. It's very it just came out of his experience, and that's what he's trying to inspire us, saying that let's push ourselves and move beyond what we're trying to do right now. It's not that what we're doing is totally wrong or something, but at least So there is still a lot of space for us to push, right? That's the whole point here. There's a question like, yeah, any I think, yeah, maybe you're also trying to suggest any suggestions in terms of books. Maybe not the
Never gone there.
fundamentals, maybe beyond that.
Uh, Suggestion for a book at this point of time. I think the last book that I liked, at least in design that way, was Change by Design, the direct cover one. Forgot the author, I think it was Tim Long only. But yeah, I think that was there. Other than that, there are a couple of books which talk about system design. I am on top of my head, I don't remember the names of these.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, I think if you're talking about design, maybe this. If you're talking about something generic, read Cybernetics, tell me also.
Hmm.
Somebody please study Cybernetics and tell me also.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. So is there anything called hey, I've done my best, right? So people say that I've done justice to design. So
Yesterday.
does it even exist,
Yesterday. Answer to that is yesterday. वो
right?
कल था आज नहीं है.
Yep. So then what is this? So even like say even like for me personally also like either ways you have an opportunity to do a redesign, right? So from
Because
platforms to
in
common,
that sense doesn't have to happen for that also. For us, we are constantly moving in terms of consultants. Being in consultancy is very interesting. You're always moving from one product to other.
yes.
We can also make sure our next product is better than the previous one.
Oh yes, right. That's right. So which means that that's the whole thing, right? So in digital, we have the advantage of redoing it, right? So then
I
so
think
now
that feedback loop is faster.
yes, so then now imagine all these filmmakers or other people who they only have one chance, right? So you
हाँ.
can't keep collapsing the building again, But some of the buildings are so well done that it's so beautiful still when you go and visit.
It's very interesting that you pointed out. I think I also missed this point in discussion in that sense. That there is far more at stake for a lot of industries.
Yes,
In that the way you talked about it. Matlab, you make a film, it's flop. There is no
yeah.
going back. In our case, that's not. Even then, we don't have time to even think about anything. Well,
Mm,
the stakes are lesser. They're higher in responsibility. The other thing that has happened is because the stakes seem low, that everything can be purged and changed. We have
mm,
forgotten that delta D, delta U that I kind of wrote there, where we talk about a design affecting a user affecting a design.
mhm.
And every time you're iterating, you're also affecting that. So
Yes,
you start with 100 users, you can't say I'm allowed to traumatize them to create the product for next 100 and keep on testing till I'm done with my batch of monkeys.
right. So
Is that what we are doing? Because I think we are.
see, so then if you see, let's take the analogy of a filmmaker. If the movies flop, whom to blame?
Himself and next movie.
Yeah, no,
Did he
but
learn anything or not from that?
at least the creator there is the director, right? So at least most of the ownership he has to take it, right? But when the movie is hit, very rarely he gets a credit, right? And there are so many people. But so in design, so now how do you have those three kind of triads, right? So is that some kind of a little bit of a blame game that is people trying to do that? I don't know, like what's
Well, it
the
depends on how you look at a system. Matlab, I'll again go neutral on this because I think that's the best way to even talk about it. Let's throw the designer hat again. If you look at the triad, it's a relationship triad.
yes.
Nobody's blaming anyone or everyone's blaming everyone. There is no in between.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to start somewhere again, and the triad interacts. You can't change that.
Got it.
So if someone's shortfalling, everyone is going to shortfall. So it is going to start progressively. So that improvement also is going to happen dot by dot. One changes, the other is going to respond by change
Mm-hmm.
or turn them back again.
Mm-hmm.
Which process takes over will decide what changes at the end of the day. And I, again, myself being in the field of design, I would want to start the change from the design. 10 years later, 20 years later, I can become an investor. I'll start from that side.
Yep. No, I think you kind of partially answered one of the questions where people, yeah, it's like, I mean, do everybody has to go meta, right? So, but I think the answer is like, why not? Is the question, right? It's not like that's the only way, but yeah, that's one of the way to start
So,
exploring is to go.
it's there is a reason physics exists and you have theoretical physics also.
Yes.
Applied physics, you have theoretical physics, and they again talk to each other synergetically. I
Yep.
think that exists. That nature also is here. In fact, art still does this. Art still goes.
Oh, yep. Yep. Absolutely.
It's just
Right.
us. It's just us. Even architecture does it. Again,
Yep.
it's just us.
Yes. Yeah. People asking you like, yeah, any for people who inspire you in design or in general. He already have mentioned Elon Musk and folks like
I
that. So I
know, like, why do I even have to answer that?
think. Yep. Yep.
But yeah, maybe in that essence, there's a person I've been reading his works a lot for a while now. It's called Douglas Hofstadter. If
Okay.
you've heard of that book called Golden Eternal Braid. So
Mm.
he has been doing a lot of work, interestingly, in computer science domain or
Yeah.
algorithmic thinking domain with the
Mm.
same meta lens.
Totally.
Kind of answer kind of to that has kind of left a lot of influence recently.
Yep. Yep. I think you must be a big fan of Christopher Nolan as well, right? So I think
Of course, did they give that away?
yeah, I think so. Maybe yeah, one of the things which a lot of folks will be curious is for your part two or a phase two kind of a talk is like a little bit trying to relate some of
Phase
these
two target.
theories.
Oh, sorry. Please go on.
Yeah, I was saying that. Yeah, so maybe if you can relate some of these little theory to kind of a practice, right? Maybe some metaphors of taking films or yeah, other disciplines. I think that's gonna help a lot of folks to get on board
That's
and
something I also want to start to do more kind of critically because I haven't been. I think the only example you saw was that dynamic persona thing because of that.
yes, yes,
There are a
yes,
couple of others which are in a very nascent stage again, even I'm trying to understand. But that's the intention. The
absolutely.
only proof of that is this dynamic persona thing.
Oh, yeah. I
Just
think,
started it.
and I think we should definitely try and socialize it and make sure that people start using that framework. So maybe, yeah, maybe that can also help a lot. So trying to pick that as a uh, wonderful. So, folks, yeah, if you don't have any questions, I think yeah, we just have 5 minutes. Maybe we can just give back the 5 minutes to everyone. I think we did
Mm,
answer most of the questions there. Yep.
heck, yeah, done.
Either closing notes, Jasmeet?
Take the Tim Brown pledge. Take the pledge.
Sure, I think it's definitely worth exploring, right? Yeah. So there's and in digital space we always have one do. So even in our decision, we can always, if it doesn't work, come back.
Yeah, I hope this was valuable. This was I never this was the first time I've been talking about this formally in that essence. I think this topic this is most like a debut of the topic, meta
Yep,
design that way. I think I don't know how much value I could actually provide in this tech in that sense to kind of help with the process. But yeah, I would leave that to people. Um,
totally, totally. No, I think it was. I think personally for me, yep, definitely it's a good trigger for all of us. Yep. Thanks, Smith. Thanks a lot for your time, and hope everybody got good insight. And
Thanks everyone for joining.
let's get into the meta world. Yep.
See ya.
Thanks everyone. Thanks for joining.